We're about to talk about one of the goofiest gag-fest movies anyone has ever made, which is also one of the very best in the genre. But we'll probably be hard-pressed not to just memberberries a lot of it. Remember that joke? Remember that one? Of course, there is a plot. They have to land the damn plane. But that's secondary to being silly. And I have no good segue, so I might as well just start promoting our sponsor, Sparkplug Coffee. Airplane goofiness, Sparkplug. They offer their customers premium quality beans. Not Airplane, Sparkplug does. It'll wind up being the best coffee you or anyone else has ever brewed in your kitchen. And because you're making it at home, it's way more affordable and convenient than going out to get a cup. As for how to get this tremendous stuff, if your address is in our home and native land of Canada, or if you're a Yank living south of the border, then you will get shipments within a week, and the delivery cost is free for Canadians. Join the Autopilot Coffee Club to make it even easier. Pause or cancel anytime, but you control how often you get your bag of beans. What's the website, you say? Well, it's sparkplug.coffee/HYES, I say. That HYES bit is our promo code, which will get you a 20% discount. One time only, although you don't have to be a new member to use that code. You can be somebody who's been with the club for a long time or the plug for a long time. Haven't used that code? Still can. Find your new favorite. So you're on your way to getting some delicious coffee, but right now, we need to get into this podcast. Bev, cue the man.
And action! Have you ever seen
Airplane? Well, hi, friends and listeners, and thank you for lending your ears to episode number 675 of this Classic Movies podcast. Every Monday, Have You Ever Seen talks about films from long ago. Well, we do. The podcast itself doesn't do that. That's weird. It's people that do it. And we spoil the plot from top to tail, although it's hard to spoil very much in a farce movie. Oh, and now that it's July, we're beginning a month full of laughs. All four of the flicks we've chosen will be comedies. I'm the one you're all counting on, Shirley. And here's my wife, the lady who flies Trans-American and whose vector isn't Victor, Bev Ellis.
That's me.
As you may or may not have guessed, you shouldn't call me Shirley because my name is Ryan. The coming attractions trivia question for Airplane. It was 10th on AFI's Top 100 Laughs list, a Top 100 that's just filled with old movies, which means that Airplane's one of the newer ones, even though it was 20 years old when that list came out, 45 years old now. So what's the only other film that ranked in the AFI's Top 20 Laughs and is a newer release than Airplane?
That would be the number 2 movie, which was Tootsie.
Mm-hmm. And even that is only 2 years younger than this.
I know, yeah.
They love their old comedies. We've complained about this before on this podcast in the past. We love His Girl Friday. It happened one night. I just said Born Yesterday about a month ago was a really good, actually funny, older movie. But so many of the ones they think are so hilarious just aren't that much, I don't think. I think you've agreed with me in the past.
Comedy ages like milk. It's very hard for a comedy to stay funny over the years.
Some of them did, yes. And this is pretty old now, too, but this aged very well. If we expand it to the top 30, by the way, on that list, then we get a lot more flicks that were released later than Airplane or Tootsie, such as A Fish Called Wanda, When Harry Met Sally, There's Something About Mary, Ghostbusters, and This is Spinal Tap. So they're all in the 20 or so to 30 spots. Okay, then Flying High, its working title, was released by Paramount. The high must be a reference to, although nobody really does drugs, do they?
Wink. No,
But
nobody, even alcohol use, the closest they come is the drinking problem
Right.
joke, which is a
You
play
can't
on
drink,
words.
period. It isn't just alcohol. Anyway, it was released by Paramount 45 years ago on July 2nd, 1980, so we're only a few days away from its 45th anniversary. The film was a juggernaut at the box office, pulling in $80 million more than it cost to produce, and that's in 1980s money, 1980 specifically money. That's about $296 million, adjusted for inflation. What a hit. But Bev, the movie has been making people bust a gut for nearly half a century. It can't hurt to remind us, though, what such an old film was about, so please give us the skinny on Aeroplane.
Ted Stryker is a traumatized fighter pilot who overcomes his fear of flying to follow his stewardess girlfriend Elaine onto her LA to Chicago flight to convince her to take him back. When the entire flight crew gets dangerously ill from tainted airplane food, Ted has to step up and land the plane safely despite his PTSD and terrible weather. With the help of his former commanding officer talking him through it from the ground, Ted lands the plane safely and Elaine takes him back.
Or, in a nutshell, airline food made many people sick, and because a few of them were pilots, it nearly got them all killed. Seems about right. Although that's a cliche about airline food. We haven't had that bad of an experience with it. I don't actually hate what we get served when we fly. First time we had in a long time was January. We just don't get very many options with, I guess, Air Canada typically, right? Sandwich or pizza is about all we get. And it's fine, but...
Well, we're flying those cheapo flights that take you to the Caribbean. It wasn't even Air Canada.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, there's quite a few numbers on Airplane. Rotten Tomatoes critics, everybody almost, thinks this is great. 97% of them like it, 70 fresh, only 2 rotten. and 89% of audiences, which is the best for the ZAZ team. David Zucker, Jerry Zucker, his brother, and Jim Abrams. The sequel, Airplane 2, the sequel, is only at 42%. This was fourth at the 1980 U.S. box office. The Empire Strikes Back was number 1, not surprisingly, the sequel to Star Wars. 9 to 5, which we just covered a few months ago, was number 2. Coal Miner's Daughter, which I covered not that long ago, was number 7. And Ordinary People, the Best Picture winner, was number 11. 7 movies in that year's top 10 at the box office were comedies, which would never happen now. Maybe you'll get 1, possibly 2. Yeah, maybe if it was like Pulp Fiction. It's not really a comedy. This is a comedy. 9 to 5 was a comedy. I think Stir Crazy was one of them as well in that top 10 in 1980. This was nominated for the BAFTA for the screenplay, surprisingly, and it won the Writers Guild Award for Best Written American Comedy. It was even nominated for the Golden Globe for Best Comedy, but no Oscar nominations. I don't know what it would have gotten for Oscars anyway. It's not that surprising it didn't get that.
I will dispute those nominations from what I learned about how they came up with the script.
Okay, we'll get to that in a few minutes. This was entered into the National Film Registry, so Congress, in 2010, along with 6 others that we've covered in the past. All the President's Men, polar opposite movie right there to this. The Empire Strikes Back, same year as this. The Exorcist, Malcolm X, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and Saturday Night Fever, which this parodies in one of the key scenes when we see when Ted met Elaine back in Nam. Airplane was 79th on the AFI's Top 100 quotes with the famous one, I'll let you say it. What do you think?
Don't call me Shirley?
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. Specifically, it's all those words. I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. Shirley, blah, 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 blah. I am serious, don't call me Shirley. We also know it was 10th on AFI's Top 100 laughs. I already said that. And I think it's funnier than at least 4 of the top 9. I looked through them all. Maybe not Some Like It Hot. I forget them all now. But I'm not the hugest fan of Tootsie, for example.
Yeah, me neither.
And MASH is good, but this is funnier. This was nominated for 3 other AFI lists. Well, 2 lists actually, but 3 other nominations. 2 were quotes. Looks like I picked the wrong week to stop sniffing glue by Lloyd Bridges is one of them. And Peter Graves' infamous, you ever seen a grown man naked? That whole exchange, but that specific line. And the 2007 AFI Top 100 list, so it could have made the second iteration of the greatest movies of all time list. All right, it's deadly hot in here right now. We're in the middle of that heat wave people remember from later June by the time we post this. Maybe that heat wave will be long gone, but let's get into it right now. What do you think of Airplane?
I'm sweating like Ted Stryker trying to land that plane right now. So I've loved this movie since I was a kid. Nobody's ever done it better. This style of comedy, it's really Zucker Abraham's style of comedy.
Even they haven't done it better with things like Naked Gun was great, but this is even better.
And plenty have tried to copy it, but this is just so damn good. I can't believe how funny it still is. Even the stuff that's in poor taste, because this movie is so silly and sweet-natured that stuff has aged as well as its slapstick jokes.
So the Peter Graves thing, especially with, was it Bobby? You like Gladiator movies?
Or like
a grown man naked?
The coffee joke.
That's really dated. I was going to say at the end, I guess I'll mention it now. Of course, I probably should have mentioned that in the Sparkplug sponsor. I didn't think to until I was already finished reading it. I think we may have seen that on TV when we were little kids, but how's it go? They're out with their friends, and the man of a couple says, I'll have another cup of coffee. And the woman's interior monologue is funny. He never drinks a second cup of my coffee.
Oh, that's from like the old Maxwell House coffee commercial. Okay. I was thinking of the other controversial coffee joke with the 2 children.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. That's actual dialogue from, I think, another Airplane movie.
Really?
I don't know if it was 0 Hour or Flight into Danger, and even Airport, which was a good movie and was nominated for Best Picture in 1970. This parodies that a little bit. But online, they talk all the time about 0 Hour and Flight into Danger. But one of the Airplane movies that they were mocking in this and making fun of has that exchange with 2 adults.
With a woman saying, I like my coffee how I like my men.
Okay, I read that online. I forgot. Maybe they did tweak it a little bit. But basically what they say was the same idea. Certainly the tone was, but with 2 adults.
Huh.
I don't know about that part. You're right. Maybe the black line is not the same. And you get actually some black people in this because, of course, the jive guys, the jive talkers. God. And what a great gag.
Yeah.
That Barbara Billingsley, that also would age pretty badly anything close to modern because most people don't know Leave It to Beaver, but that's Leave It to Beaver's mom, June Cleaver in that show. Barbara Billingsley knows how to speak jive.
So all they wrote for that whole part was shit mofo because they just didn't have something for it. And then when they were doing auditions, the 2 actors who were Al White and Norm Gibbs, they were like, can you come up with some jive? They were like, we're sorry. We're just 3 white Jewish guys from Milwaukee. This is the best that we could do. And they came up with this on the spot. That whole exchange was written by those 2 guys, even the Barbara Billingsley stuff.
Okay.
I thought that was so cool.
And then, of course, they subtitle it so we know what they're actually saying.
God, it's so funny. And it is the kind of thing where it's like, if you saw it written down and you tried to decipher, you'd be like, okay, this makes some sense.
Has anyone ever tried, I wonder, in any other farce movie like this, to do something very similar, but have them speak the King's English type of thing, but then subtitle jive. But then you make it seem like Barbara Billingsley and the other people don't understand them, as if they're hearing jive, but they're not. That would be a pretty esoteric joke. Maybe it wouldn't work very well. What about our two leads, though? Because they're both new to movies. They'd never made one before. Robert Hayes was on TV at this time. Julie Haggerty, her movie debut as well. We loved her in Lost in America. We covered that many years ago.
Which would have come out pretty shortly after this, I
5
suppose.
years after this.
5 years, okay.
And she's done plenty of things since then. We'll go over her credits a little later on.
But she's never been a star.
No, she never became a star. Neither did he either.
Yeah, stardom.
But here they are in their first movie. What a blockbuster. And they're appropriately cast for the leads, because I think one of the reasons why this movie works is that, first of all, you're casting new people, new faces, so you could have established actors, but it does help to have new faces who get the joke, too. They play it serious.
Old faces that have only been in serious roles.
That's where I was going to next.
Yeah.
You cast Leslie Nielsen, Peter Graves, Lloyd Bridges, and Robert Stack. Bridges is the most zany of all of them, I guess, but for the most part, they're playing it straight, too. So you've got this weird dichotomy. Leslie Nielsen's the boat captain in Poseidon Adventure, which we covered a few years ago. Deadly serious role. He'd played serious roles for a long time. But then he's cast as Dr. Rumack in this, and of course we know from Naked Gun and other things since. Always playing it straight, but that's what's so funny about it. You question the screenplay nominations and the win for the WGA. Okay, yeah, it was a lot of improv. Maybe if they'd won.
No, that's not why I question it.
Okay, well, I just want to say this part, and then you can respond. You have to set this stuff up properly. Maybe it wasn't a screenplay the way that Citizen Kane was a screenplay on paper or Pulp Fiction, and then they read what they were told to say. Yeah, improving, like the Jive guys, for example, happen a lot in this film. I'm sure other improvs happen too. But if you don't set these things up right, it would never work. Having gags like the, good luck, we're all counting on you, which he says, I think 3 times, Nielsen does to them, including when they've landed.
Oh, yeah.
You've got to write that properly and then have him just read it like it's a serious moment, like that 0 Hour movie was.
So I'm not saying the script isn't wonderful. I think the script is perfect, but it's perfect because they caught 0 Hour late night on TV and they said, wow, this is a perfectly structured story and it's so serious that it's just begging to be parodied. And they literally took the script word for word. They changed nothing about the story. Oh, that's not true. The studio insisted that it was a smaller plane. They insisted that they change it to an airliner and have passengers so that it was more relatable.
These guys want a propeller plane. That's why when you see the outside of it, you hear that.
But all the beats are the same as 0 Hour. So you can't give them credit because part of what makes this movie work is that it is a really well-structured story. Mm-hmm. You care if they land the plane. Mm-hmm. You are invested in Ted and Elaine getting back together. That's part of why the movie works and why everybody loves it so much. But that only comes from the screenplay that they were very blatantly and admit to plagiarizing, ripping off completely.
So the dialogue is...
The jokes are the jokes, and they are genius. They are perfect. I think the script is incredible. Do you give a prize, though, when there's that much level of plagiarism? But the jokes are so well written.
And these guys made other farce movies after that. Some of them were pretty good, too, like The Naked Gun.
It's funny, we were talking about how the 2 leads didn't become stars from this movie, but it really made a star out of Leslie Nielsen, who had been, a character actor his whole career. He said he was thrilled to get the part. Lots of people turned it down. Christopher Lee said that he turned it down. He said it was a huge mistake that he did. And they offered the part to other people, but they were more famous actors, so the actor they could get was Leslie Nielsen. And he said they cast against type, but he's like, no, they've been casting me against type my whole career. I've always been a comic actor, but they just keep casting me in these serious roles because that's just the pigeonhole where I landed. Mm-hmm. And then finally got cast in this, and everybody was like, his timing was perfect. He just understood exactly what he was supposed to do. He totally got the assignment and pulled it off perfectly. They then cast him in Naked Gun. I think Naked Gun is really what made him a star.
Right. Isn't it funny, too, that the famous line that's on the AFI's quotes list, and he's so well known for it, is him saying first, I am serious. And don't call me Shirley, but the I am serious part, because for so many years, that's what he was.
I have to add, because we're Canadian, he is a Canadian. Canadians love him. Oh, yeah. People love owning Leslie Nielsen as one of us.
Naked Gun, my favorite gag in the whole movie, I think, and there's a lot of good ones in that one, too, is when he goes in to see Nordberg in the hospital, but one of the bad guys is trying to kill Nordberg. So he throws the pillow at Leslie Nielsen's face, and he catches it like he can't.
He's stuck to his face, but he's holding it on his own face.
He plays that perfectly. Maybe other people could do it, but I'm not sure anybody could do it any better than he did. So the movie opens, by the way, with a Jaws parody, which isn't surprising. It was such a huge hit 5 years earlier, and even Jaws 2 was a big hit. So they're probably seeing Jaws 2 playing on the big screen around the time they were preparing this. Well, they wrote the screenplay a long time before, but they couldn't get it made. They wrote the Kentucky Fried Movie as well that John Landis directed. And I guess they didn't like what he did because I read online about how we got to direct the next thing we make, meaning he messed it up. Although I think that movie was pretty well liked, and I think it was nominated for the AFI's Funnies list too.
Oh, wow.
I think I saw it once. It was okay anyway. But they wanted to direct their own movie, and then the three of them, it was going to be hard to get them in the guild. So I read that Abrams actually called himself Zucker. He changed his name legally to Zucker or something like that. So it's the Zuckers brothers could do it, but the Zuckers and Abrams couldn't. It was some weird thing. But anyway, they've been a team. Well, actually, a lot of the time, it's only one of the Zuckers that I think it's usually David that directs the other ones they've made together. David directed The Naked Gun and its sequel. Abrams directed Hot Shots. That's pretty funny, too. And then Jerry had his own career with Ghost, which we've covered before.
Oh, yeah.
And Rat Race. I don't know if they were involved. I didn't look that up. But also Top Secret, which is also pretty funny. That's Val Kilmer. And then First Night, which has nothing to do with any of these parody movies. That's about King Arthur and Guinevere and everybody. So the guys split directing credit on some of the other movies they made, and then Jerry went off to do his own thing for a while there as well. And I wonder how three guys directing would have worked. You always hear about the Coens, that Joel's the one that actually just tells the actors, do this thing next time, do that. And Ethan's more quiet about things. They work together in the writing room and editing, but it's Joel who's more the official director, which is why he, I guess, was always credited as the director for so long. But these three guys, I'd love to see how that worked. I didn't read anything about how Hayes or Nielsen or Graves or anyone said they confused messages, or what a team. Whenever they said something, they were always in sync. Because how could you always be in sync? I wish I'd read about that. That'd be a fascinating thing, too, to watch this and see Jerry's mad because David said that and he doesn't agree with them. But maybe they did always agree.
Well, they made this movie for a very small budget, $3.5 million, on a very short time span.
They made that money back in about a week, by the way.
Oh, yeah. The box office was like $170 million, something like that.
No, I said earlier. It was 80. But adjusted, it's almost 300.
Wow. Maybe I was looking at the international box office. Anyway, they couldn't have been arguing that much on set because you have to be really efficient and get your act together to get any movie made in a short period of time.
I'm just speculating.
The guys from It's Always Sunny said it was a huge stroke of luck that there were three of them that were basically in charge of decisions. That's McElhenney, Charlie Day, and
Glenn Howerton.
And they were like, well, they agreed early on that if they were ever arguing, they would just put it to a vote. It's going to be 2 against 1 no matter what. The amount of hours that saved us in arguing, because you win sometimes and you lose sometimes.
And do it in the writer's room, too, which I know Joel and Ethan apparently was what they would always do. I don't know if they ever had bad disagreements, Joel and Ethan. Maybe Big Lebowski. I don't like that gag.
To waste in the writer's room, yeah.
Do all that. Mm-hmm. You're wrong. No, you're wrong. I hate you. I'll come back tomorrow, maybe.
And then you're not in front.
But then when you go on set, nobody knows you ever disagreed 2 months ago.
But maybe with the Zuckers and Abrahams, you've got 3 people, so maybe that's it. They always have a tiebreaker.
It could be, yeah. So I mentioned the Jaws opening, then we get the white zone, red zone debate. Apparently those were actual airport announcers.
Yeah, and they were a real married couple.
At LAX, they actually did that anyway. And they gave them this dialogue to say with all these silly things. The white zone, red zone, where you can park, where you can't park.
She's like, I know what this is about. This is because you wanted me to have an abortion.
Yeah, right.
And so you're really telling the audience, this is the kind of movie that you're watching, okay?
And if anyone recognized their names, or voices, I should say, and they probably did, I guess they wouldn't know they were married. You wouldn't think they were. You could think the movie's making that up, but apparently they actually were.
Yeah. And apparently they just had a blast doing it. They were super into it.
And we also see more than once in this movie the religious types at the airport, obviously the Hare Krishnas, but all kinds of people trying to get you to convert or to be part of their religion.
I guess that was a thing in the 80s.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that dated? Because I don't know if I've ever seen that before in an airport.
I never have.
You've flown way more than I have.
I'm sure we saw Hare Krishna at the airport when I was a kid. But that was also before you needed to go through elaborate security to get to the gate. So I think that's part of why you would get more riffraff in the airport.
Yeah, right.
Whereas now, you can't get people when they're waiting. Because everybody, when they go to the airport, just wants to get through all of their business.
They might punch you in the face.
They might punch you in the face. I have a plane to catch, get in my way. Whereas if you can approach people while they're waiting for their plane at the gate, then you're going to have a more captive audience.
Yeah, I think back then you could get as far as, you're right, the gate. You couldn't get on the plane if you didn't have a ticket, but you could get to the gate. I'm sure that's true. I don't know. I never flew till 1998 when I was 24, I guess, and didn't fly again until I was 34, I believe it was. So if we didn't say already, maybe you did in the skinny, but Ted drives a taxi because he's a traumatized, PTSD-driven, not World War II, Vietnam veteran who flew fighter planes. Of course, he doesn't know how to fly a jumbo airliner, which is smart. And Elaine's done with him because of the fact that she just can't live with this guy who's so traumatized. Apparently David Letterman auditioned for it, but then didn't want to do it. So
they wrote it for him. They wrote the part for him.
But he didn't actually want to be an actor, I guess, so he didn't audition a second time like they wanted him to, and then they went with Hayes instead. Letterman might have been funny, but again, you cast a funny guy. If you remade this movie now, or did another sequel, for example, but remake it, basically, I know The Naked Gun that comes out sometime this summer is supposed to be a sequel, I believe, because Liam Neeson plays the son of Frank Drebin. It's not a remake. He's not playing Frank Drebin. He's Frank Drebin Jr. or whatever his name's going to be. But anyway, if you're going to make another airplane movie, I was thinking, who would they get to play the doctor? They'd probably go with someone like Will Ferrell, and he'd be funny. But it'd be better if you went with somebody who's not known for being funny. Although maybe because they did that so well here, if you do the same thing now and find all these serious actors, like a Liam Neeson, for example, in a supporting role, he'd probably be a good Dr. Rumack if they remade Airplane, but he's already going to be a Naked Gun, so...
What's the actor's name who played Ehrmantraut on Breaking Bad?
Jonathan Banks, who's in this, though.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's probably why he came to mind. Although he's done comedy. He was in a season of Community.
That's right, yeah. He always played it straight, though. He's in Beverly Hills Cop, too, but he doesn't do anything that's funny in that.
That's the point, right? Is you want somebody who's just so convincing as a straight man.
Or he could be one of the guys at the airport, too. Rex Kramer or Captain Over, for example. Over, Roger. What? Okay, there you go, Roger. So Kareem Abdul-Jabbar plays Roger Murdoch, pretending he's not actually Kareem Abdul-Jabbar until they drag him out of there after he's been poisoned by the fish, too. The three people, the two pilots and whatever that guy in the back is, the navigator, I don't even call that job. But they all ate fish, so they're all poisoned, so they all have to be pulled out of there. And when they pull Kareem out, he's wearing his basketball shorts and knee pads, but he denies that he's Kareem to that kid especially the whole time. And I guess it was supposed to be Pete Rose. But I think they got lucky with Kareem, even though he's not good in this.
No, it's true.
The whole thing, when apparently, I read this online, he was actually supposedly legit irritated, maybe because the ZAZs were tweaking the kid, say this about it, doesn't play defense, and he loafs. And maybe Kareem didn't know it was coming. He grabs him by the collar and he says, hey kid, I gotta carry Bill Walton up and down the court, whatever he says, right? You could see him looking off camera, obviously at a cue card. It's like he's on SNL at that moment.
Yeah.
He's not a good actor in this, but it is a funny bit to have him play Roger Murdoch, who is a pilot and likes to fly planes. But then in the end, he obviously is Kareem because he's got knee pads on.
He's not great, but he's game. He's definitely trying. Till the point where he's reading cue cards.
He's played himself in other movies, too, because Chris and I covered him in D2, the Mighty Ducks sequel, and Basketball on Scoring at the Movies. I think they're really small roles, but still, he was in those. And when he does movies, he almost always just plays himself, including in the end, in this, even though he's supposed to be Roger Murdoch. Even that whole thing, Roger, huh? When he hears his name, right? You can't do take 2 or 3, or is that just the best? We did 100 takes with Kareem, and that was the best one.
Again, $3.5 million budget. They may have just been like, well, we got to make the day. Let's move on.
The joke will work because this huge basketball player. That also is probably a little dated for people. If they just came across this movie now, we've talked before about our nephew Nathan, who does love old movies. But maybe kids who aren't really big movie fans, 20 years old, what have you, would watch this and they'd probably laugh. But they wouldn't get the coffee gag, meaning the woman musing about, he doesn't drink my coffee.
Yeah.
Never asked for a second cup of my coffee. And they wouldn't get some of the other things that were referring to the disaster movies of that era, probably, like singing to the girl. That whole gag's funny when she accidentally pulls her breathing tube out.
I never knew that was based on anything, and I always thought that joke was funny.
So that's not really dated, I guess. But Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, would they ever know who that is, unless they're a basketball fan? Probably not, right?
I mean, you knew who Pete Rose was. You never saw him play back in your day, did you?
I know, but I know more things than most people.
I know who Pete Rose is, and I've never voluntarily watched a baseball game, so...
Okay. It's good to have Kareem in this, too, because you get a black guy. You also get J.J. Walker. Dynamite! He's cleaned the windows of the plane. That's him.
Is that right?
Yeah.
He lifts up the hood. Checks the So stupid.
The heart transplant thing, by the way, was in at least one other plane movie. I think maybe an airport they had something like that.
It's kind of like Scary Movie. My reference for a movie that was making fun of movies that I've actually seen. Some of them are universal references that everybody's going to get. Some of them are a little bit more deep cuts, but I don't think you need to know those movies to enjoy the jokes and still find it funny. Yeah. There is an extra layer if you're familiar with them.
I think it's David who directed at least one or maybe in a couple of the Scary Movie sequels, by the way. The later ones, maybe 3 and 4 or something like that. And also, we've talked about this line before about sometimes you see old movies and there'll be this whole pause. Something will be said, and then the actor won't say anything for a good second, 2, 3 seconds. You think, where's the pace on that? And this movie is what we referred to before. It's when the kid is talking to Kareem. They had to leave space for laughter in there. So the kid looks at him with this type of look on his face.
It was whatever line came before Have You Ever Seen a Grown Man Naked? Because the laughter was so big that it landed on that line. And nobody could hear the Grown Man Naked line, which, of course, is literally nominated for the quotes, right?
Could have made the list, I think.
Yeah.
Now, what about you said before, tasteless joke? It's obviously tasteless. But Peter Graves, who'd always been a serious guy doing it, he didn't want to do this movie at first because of that. He was bothered by that line, especially, I guess. The whole point with the kid is multiple things he's saying to this kid that suggests he's into little boys. That obviously doesn't age very well, but
They lied to him, too. Did you know that?
No.
They said, don't worry, there's other stuff in the movie and scenes that you're not in that give it context so that the audience knows that you're not a pedophile.
Oh, okay.
And he was like, oh, okay, fine, I'll say it. But they were making that up just to get him to comply.
He wasn't too mad because he's in the sequel.
Because you see the movie, you see it's a joke, and you see how silly the movie is, and nobody really is.
And it was a blockbuster hit, too, not just a successful movie.
That'll move you to forgive people.
It was more profitable than Empire Strikes Back was, which was also...
Well, because the budget was so low.
Because of that, Empire Strikes Back would have cost quite a bit of money to make, but this cost next to nothing. Look how much it made.
Yeah. Comedies are the best like that. It's either a horror movie or a comedy where your budget to profit ratio can be super high.
Friday the 13th that year was a gigantic hit. Because of that, it cost nothing to make, and it was, I think, in the top 15 or 20 at the box office that year.
Yeah.
And Halloween a few years before that, even more so. Even less of a budget and made even more money than Friday the 13th did. But what about Elaine and Ted and their flashback, Dancing to Staying Alive? That, of course, was so famous from only a few years before in Saturday Night Fever. Fun sequence. They do a good job of playing the main characters, and Julie Haggerty's always been so likable. And he's fine, too. But those scenes in a way are almost like, let's get through these. Get back to the plane. And we get Nielsen, and we get Graves and Stack and Bridges on the ground as well in the terminal. What do you call it?
The tower? Is it supposed to be
the tower?
The tower?
Yeah, there you go, yeah. So they're fine. What do you think of those two as a couple? They're cute together, though, for sure.
I guess I agree. They have to be there. They're the heart of the film. I do think they carry the film, and they're perfect casting. You talk about the Saturday Night Fever sequence. I think it's funny. I love the gag with the two little girls, the Girl Guides.
Yeah, right. Fighting each other.
Girl Scouts.
Beating the crap out of each other, too.
So
it's a vicious fight.
Because they're in the rotten top bar where everyone's vicious. They're not the funniest thing in the movie because you can't be. The leads are rarely the funniest people in the movie, right?
But they do get another funny bit, though, too. That's pretty good, the Saturday Night Fever stuff, Staying Alive. But also the From Here to Eternity homage, when they're covered in seaweed. Because when Burt Lancaster kisses Deborah Carr, it's romantic and beautiful, and they look great. But the reality is that sometimes seaweed does cover you, and that's what happens to these two when they're kissing.
Such a great example of how the comedy in this movie works and what makes it unique, because in that scene, they're kissing on the beach. It's supposed to be sexy and romantic, like From Here to Eternity, but then they get completely bombarded by waves. And then when the wave retreats, they're covered in seaweed. And in that moment, I think most comedies would have them sputtering and coughing and saying, well, let's get out of here. But no, they act like that's exactly what they expected to happen and what they intended. They're covered in seaweed, and they just carry on being like, oh, I love you so much. I hope we can always be together like this. And then another wave comes, and they're just kissing right through it. That's what makes Airplane special. Those actors never break.
By the way, I see my notes here. It's 37 minutes before we see Leslie Nielsen, so almost halfway in the movie before he makes his first appearance.
He does not have a very big part. It's funny how he looms so large.
He scores so much when he does get to speak.
I think it's more that he was obviously great in the movie, stands out in the movie, but so do lots of people. It's more that they saw him on set, recognized the talent, and then cast him as Frank Drebin.
Oh, yeah, 8 years.
And Police Squad even came before that, right?
That was a TV show, yeah.
The show came first, and then Naked Gun,
Yeah, because the Naked Gun's actual title is The Naked Gun from the Files of the Police Squad, or from the Files of Police Squad, maybe not The Police Squad. One of the gags in the movie is a good one, but they maybe do overuse a little bit, is Otto, as in the autopilot, but it's an actual blow-up doll. It is still pretty funny, though, when Elaine blows up Otto, and the blow-up part is where the crotch is. So I think it must be when Rumack comes in, the doctor comes in, Nielsen, and sees her blowing it up that way. It's like he's giving it head. And the good gag at the end where they're both satisfied and smoking cigarettes together.
And her hair's all a mess.
Right. Pretty good on her, too, to be willing to do something like that.
Repeat, too, later when they're all being jostled around the cabin, the autopilot gets behind her and the inflatable hands are on her boobs.
And also when it's getting blown up. It already has a smile. It has a bigger smile. Well, the running gag as well, and it's also an AFI-nominated quote line, is, I picked a hell of a week to quit. First it's, I think, drinking, then it's sniffing glue. That's the one that's referenced by the AFI. I think he says 3 different versions of the...
It's smoking, and then drinking.
And then sniffing glue.
And then sniffing glue?
Which he does some kind of sniffing of something later on. His hair's all standing straight up. Lloyd Bridges actually was in a lot of farce-type movies, and yet he wasn't really known for it at this point either. But he's the most over-the-top of the 4 older guys, Nielsen, Graves, Bridges, and Stack, I think. The rest of them do play it pretty straight. He's the one that actually is more, I'm being funny, and I know I'm being funny.
He'll, cross his eyes and fall backwards when he's high on glue. Yeah. A little
I'm not criticizing, but he's the one
he doesn't overdo it. There's one actor who absolutely overdoes it.
Steven Stucker.
I can't remember if his character even has a name, but anybody who's seen the movie will recognize him as the gay guy in the tower, right?
He's air traffic controller Johnny Henshaw Jacobs.
Right, and he's a little effeminate, and he's very over the top. He has this vaudevillian style, while everyone else is as serious as a heart attack. If there's one mistake in the movie, in my opinion, it's letting him go wild like that.
He was a friend of theirs, I think, and when I heard the commentary on this, I think they talked about how funny they thought he was and how much they laughed. We don't agree.
I totally disagree. It feels like he's in a different movie. Everybody else is on the same page except for him.
And getting back to great gags, too, is when Ethel Merman's in the movie. This pilot, the soldier, whatever, is having PTSD, and he thinks he's Ethel Merman. Okay, that would just be a decently funny little reference, but then you cut to the actual Ethel Merman getting up and singing her signature song. Another person no one would know now. I wouldn't recognize her face.
I remember watching this movie as a kid. My parents were with me, and they started cracking up at that joke. And my mom's like, that's actually Ethel. She had to tell me.
Yeah, but the name would mean nothing to you. I said we were going to do memberberries. Well, here's another member. Of course, the slap line. Remember the slap line? That was apparently supposed to just be maybe one or two people slapping her, but then it becomes this whole line of people that come up to, get a hold of yourself, smack. And then Nielsen hits her twice, actually. But then
on the way out, he hits her once.
Right? But then there's a whole line of people doing that. I think she's also the coffee woman. I think she's the one that talks about, he never asked for a second cup of my coffee.
Yeah, there's the suburban middle-class white family. That's them.
Right. And a big part of the movie, of course, too, is Rex Kramer, which is the Robert Stack character. Maybe has the third most dialogue in the movie because he's talking for so long from the tower to Ted. They have this rivalry because he was his boss. I wonder if they maybe based some of First Blood on some of this stuff. Now, that's a very serious movie, but Stallone's former boss, same type of situation. He's got to talk him down. In this case, talk him down to save his life in a plane. But in that, it's, what's his name? Not Robert. Can't remember his name now. Anyway, Stallone's former commander in Vietnam is the one that has to try to calm him down so he doesn't just kill everybody. Although he never kills anybody in that movie deliberately, by the way, in First Blood. In the sequels, he does. Richard Crenna, that's his name.
Okay, I would say he was never going to go crazy and kill everybody, but they all overreact.
Well, true, yeah. But anyway, same type of situation. I wonder if they referred to this movie with that, because that's what Rex is with Ted. Ted doesn't like him from stuff that happened in Vietnam. I mentioned this guy Zip a few times. Win one for the zipper.
Oh, yeah.
And then Rex keeps talking to Ted while Elaine and Ted are kissing because they've landed and everything's fine. But he keeps on going on and on and on, still playing it deadly straight. And then Otto reinflates and takes off. Fine. I didn't love that gag. I don't really need more Otto, I don't think, but that's okay. And then one of the better gags,
just
though.
Just about enough of your Otto bashing!
We go back to the cab. The guy that's waiting all that time. What's he say? 5 more minutes and I'm out of here?
I think he says 20 more minutes, which is so much funnier than 5 more minutes.
He's been there for hours.
The meter's
and they're not supposed to park in that zone, and somehow the cab's been there this whole time.
And he's just 20 more minutes, and then I'm leaving.
Robert Hayes, this was his debut movie, and it was Haggerty's debut. They were both in the sequel as well. He was also in the Homeward Bound movies, so must have a small role, because that's about the dogs. And he was Tony Stark, the voice of, in TV cartoons. He did many other things beyond that, but I thought that was a pretty noteworthy thing, that he is the Robert Downey Jr. character before RDJ. He was Iron Man on TV cartoons. Haggerty, though, was in Lost in America, which we loved. We covered that years ago. What about Bob? She's Dreyfuss's wife. And Marriage Story, which I don't remember. I've got to see that movie.
She's ScarJo's mom.
Is that who she is?
Oh, my God. We should watch that again.
It's been too long. Got to see it again.
It's a really good one.
We mentioned Nielsen's credits already. Peter Graves, he was in the sequel as well. I guess Nielsen wasn't. I didn't write down if he was. I must have missed it, or he wasn't. But Graves was in Stalag 17, which I covered a year or two ago, and The Night of the Hunter, which we covered recently as well. Angels in the Outfield. Chris and I did that on Scoring at the Movies, and he was best known probably before all of that for being in Mission Impossible. I think he's the Jim Phelps character. We talked about Kareem. Lloyd Bridges worked for 65 years and was known before this, I guess, best as the Deputy Marshal in High Noon. Robert Stack worked for 60 years. He was in To Be or Not to Be, which we've got to see again, because you saw it and you don't remember you saw it, but it's very funny. That was in 1942, so almost 40 years earlier, when he was still a very young man, of course. He was nominated for an Oscar for Written on the Wind, a supporting actor nomination, I believe it was, which is a Douglas Sirk movie. And he was a part of Unsolved Mysteries on TV.
His voice is written in my brain as a man telling me about wacky stuff happening in small American towns and
some of these guys are known for TV.
Murders.
I think if you remember last year, I talked about, what was it? Canadian directors is what I use, but directors, their most underrated movie. And I mentioned Uncommon Valor for Ted Kotcheff, not the biggest name of all time, but I chose Canadian directors. But I love Uncommon Valor, and he's the guy that funds the mission. So I actually know him best from that because I saw the movie so many times as a kid. Lorna Patterson, this was her only movie. So she's Randy, the other flight attendant, along with Julie Haggerty. She was in many TV shows, though, and she was Private Benjamin in the TV series Private Benjamin. There is one of the top 10 comedies as well in 1980 at the box office, Private Benjamin.
Yeah.
So Goldie had a big year with that movie, but then Lorna Patterson played the same character in the TV series. We mentioned Barbara Billingsley and Jonathan Banks, so he's in The Tower as well. We've covered him in serious roles in Beverly Hills Cop, of course, a great comedy. And Total Recall, he's in that too, but we probably best know him now for TV stuff, Breaking Bad, and Better Call Saul. Man, is he great in those. And then Steven Stucker, the guy we don't like very much, was in the sequel. He'd been in Kentucky Fried Movie that they wrote, and he's in Trading Places, which we covered a year or two ago. I do not remember who he was in that. And he, by the way, got to ad-lib a lot. I think for the most part the actors didn't ad-lib a lot, but he got to.
Well, the Kentucky Fried Movie comes from the Kentucky Fried Theater. Their group.
This was going to be the Kentucky Fried Airplane at one point.
Their skit group. That makes sense. They were a branded group. They had some name recognition. He was like part of that troupe.
They let their friend go wild. And well, apparently they were disappointed that more of the gags didn't work for big laughs, as far as the spear at one point, just randomly in the background when Stack and Bridges are in the tower and you see this spear, apropos of nothing. Also, poop hits the fan literally in this movie. That's a pretty good gag. But there's some things in the tower that they thought should have got a bigger reaction.
The tower is not the best stuff. It's got some good jokes for sure.
Especially with Bridges, yeah.
The best stuff happens on the plane.
We've probably missed 10 or 12 great jokes, by the way.
It is one of those movies, no matter how many times you've seen it, you notice things with every viewing that you either forgot about or you never noticed.
And if I didn't mention already, this was the ZAZ's directorial debut. What a start to making movies as directors. They weren't involved in the sequel, though. Ken Finkelman, if you're Canadian, you probably know that name. He made The Newsroom, not the one that Aaron Sorkin did.
Newsroom, yes. Not the Sorkin.
And there were many versions of even that one. The original one that I did in maybe the mid-90s was the funniest. They did other seasons and they weren't nearly as good. But the first couple of years of that, I loved that show so much. Deadpan.
Predecessor to a lot of shows that people love that I think it was incredibly influential on. Mostly I think of The Office. It predated the BBC Office, and there's no way those people did not see the CBC version of The Newsroom. Yeah,
Canadian show. He wrote that, by the way, the sequel, with Al Jean and Mike Reiss, who were the first showrunners on The Simpsons. And Al Jean's doing it again after leaving for a long time.
Speaking of movies that you had on VHS at home and were a big deal, I didn't see Airplane till I was maybe 11 or 12.
But
we had Airplane 2.
It's funny, too.
My family's so weird. I saw Airplane 2 1,000 times before I saw Airplane. I saw Spaceballs 100,000 times before I saw Star Wars. I saw Grease 2 so many times before I finally saw Grease.
I saw Rocky 3 many times before Rocky 1.
Probably the most egregious one here is I never saw Wizard of Oz until I was an adult. Return to Oz. Oh, that was a big one in our house.
And Airplane 2, they didn't want to do it, but it is pretty funny, I think.
I recall loving it.
Shatner does a pretty good job playing serious, but being funny. The producers were John Davison, who worked on Starship Troopers, which, of course, is a satire, too. Different kind of satire, not blatantly funny all the time, but is funny a lot of the time. The ZAZs were executive producers, and so was Howard Koch, who worked on The Odd Couple, which we covered a few years ago, and then Ghost. So he and Jerry worked together on that, which has some funny moments, obviously Whoopi especially, but it's a serious movie. The film's 185-1. We watched our DVD, which was spotty, but was pretty much acceptable. It was not a big problem. Didn't look terrible. Joseph Baroque, I guess is how you say the name, B-I-R-O-C. He shot the sequel as well. Also, he and another guy shot It's Wonderful Life and The Longest Yard, which Chris and I covered on Scoring at the Movies. And he won an Oscar many years before for another disaster movie, not funny though, a serious one, The Towering Inferno. The editor was Patrick Kennedy, very vital obviously, any comedy needs good timing. He cut Mr. Mom a couple of years later, so another comedy, but a lot of other mediocre comedies are on his resume. Airplane stands out above everything else. And the composer, who they did not want to write a good score, they wanted him to write a more of a cheesy type of score, and he knew the assignment, did it well. Elmer Bernstein, one of the legends, even then probably, certainly since, worked on The Ten Commandments, Sweet Small Success, Magnificent Seven, To Kill a Mockingbird, HUD, The Great Escape, Trading Places, Ghostbusters, and Far From Heaven. We've covered all of those, and also he did the Babe score, so the John Goodman as Babe Ruth movie, which Chris and I covered on Scoring at the Movies. I think that's maybe 10 films in total we've now done of Elmer Bernstein. The look, the cutting, the music, fine?
Fine. Yes. I find it always really hard to judge comedies on this kind of stuff.
The cutting is the most important thing.
I mean, the pacing is immaculate. The look is perfect in the sense that they're going for a B movie and they're getting it.
The cockpit scenes would have cost next to nothing to do. It isn't Ed Wood level. It doesn't look like an Ed Wood movie, but it would cost nothing to have a little cockpit with a few actors in it and a few dials and gauges and things. Mm-hmm. What happens next? Well, forgetting that there was a sequel, because there actually was, and they go to space. I know that much. The plane ends up in space.
Yeah, they do.
I will muse that Ted and Elaine have all sorts of babies together, and they never board a plane ever again, even though I know in the sequel they do. Okay, then, last thoughts on our first movie of July, the comedy month we're going to do here for comedies, and one of the greatest comedies of all time that's still funny. Member Bev, memberberries, Airplane, !
Well, yeah, kudos to this movie for doing something that I think a lot of revered comedies don't necessarily do, which is stay funny. They clearly had their priorities straight. We just want to make audiences laugh nonstop. And it's funny, when I was looking up the trivia and I saw that Tootsie came out after Airplane, I was struck by how Tootsie feels like a much older film to me than Airplane does. And it's more that Airplane isn't aging, where Tootsie 100% is aging. On that note, ZAZ, one of them said in this interview that I read, as people who grew up watching Airplane are getting older, it keeps climbing the ranks of funniest movies. And they were like, all those Some Like It Hot fans are going to die, and we're going to get number one, baby.
Which, when we watched it again years after we first saw it, because I don't think I raved about it when we covered it for the podcast a long time ago, I liked it more the second time. Lemon is brilliant.
Oh, that movie is
Tony Curtis is
so
great,
funny.
And Marilyn's very good. But Lemon, I knew he was good the first few times I saw it, but I saw it again with you, whenever that was, and thought, oh, I missed it. And, of course, Joe E. Brown as well.
I'm sure we must have addressed this when we covered that movie and Tootsie. Isn't it crazy that number 1 and 2 movies on the comedies list are both cross-dressing movies? Mm-hmm. But he's right. The movies you grew up with are the ones that you were going to consistently think are the funniest movies.
You know why this might be maintaining or getting better for audiences in general? Why younger people would probably be drawn to this too? Is that there have been probably even more disaster movies the last 20 or 30 years than there ever were before. There were plenty of them back in the 70s, and they were huge hits. Poseidon Adventure, Towering Inferno, and so on, Airport. But there's so many movies that are that type now, or action movies in general, that you can mock. Hot Shots plays off of Rambo and Apocalypse Now a little bit, and Top Gun, of course. And it's very funny. I think the first two, like there are only 2 Hot Shots movies, are actually quite funny. The Naked Gun sequels aren't as good as the first Naked Gun. They're still pretty funny. Mm-hmm. The first Scary Movie, I don't like the other ones very much, is funny. Those are all lasting, maybe because they're playing off of things that we see so much of, especially with something like this. We're always going to get disaster movies and action movies. This is not really an action movie exactly, but a thriller, I guess, is what it's playing off of. And as we said before, there is an actual story. You want to see these two get back together, Ted and Elaine, and you want to see them land the plane.
And it really is just the stupidest masterpiece there is.
Fair enough. And the Zazes, or Team ZAZ, would not have a problem with you saying that, I don't think.
I hope not.
So some of the gags are dated, like the coffee thing, and people probably don't know who Kareem is anymore if they're young. I'm talking to young people watching
Okay,
this.
They don't know who Ethel Merman is, at least.
Definitely not her either. And probably even most of the actors, most of them are not even alive anymore, I don't think, or they're old people like Hayes and Haggerty. They've got to be 70s or probably even older, I guess, now. And even though they thought the gags like the spear going to the wall was a good gag, it's not. But for the most part, I would have to say this is probably always going to be the benchmark for how to do this type of farce comedy. Play it serious, let the script and the execution make it funny. But also, it helps if you cast people no one expects to be in something like this, like Nielsen, Graves, Bridges, and Stack. Just want to say, we're all counting on you. We've already landed. Ted, let me tell you another story. They're already leaving the plane, and Otto is taking off, actually. So that was how we saw Airplane. Next week's episode will be the Monday in July, where Bev is off. I'll be taking a solo look at the Fonda Cagney Lemon war comedy classic, Mr. Roberts. But since we don't do coming attractions trivia questions for shows I do on my own, then the trivia is for the show we'll do after that, a flick that turns 30 years old on the day that we release the podcast, which will be July 21st, and that's Living in Oblivion, Tom DeSillo's funny take on Steve Buscemi trying to direct an independent film with a bunch of screw-ups, including himself. And the coming attractions trivia is actually an opinion question for that. So if you were scratching out a living working on independent films like they do in that film, and you couldn't be the star, one of the stars, the director, the producer, the writer, the editor, you edit, of course, I had to include that one. None of the top line people, not the cinematographer. What job would you want?
Okay, so for the answer to that question, check out our episode 2 weeks from now about living in Oblivion. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to favorite or subscribe. There are hundreds of episodes available for you to check out.
675.
Oh, Lord, there's so many. And if you like us and you'd like to support the podcast, the best way you can do that is by leaving us a rating and a review. And you can support the podcast by going to sparkplug.coffee/HYES for freshly roasted premium coffee, and that HYES will get you a one-time 20% discount. You can also find us on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis. And we'd love to hear from you guys. There's a few ways to reach us, starting with Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis. Ryan is at MovieFiend51. We're also on Blue Sky. You can find us as Bev Ellis Ellis and Ryan-Ellis. And our email address is haveyoueverseenpodcast@gmail.com.
We didn't mention this in the entire episode until the very end, but I'll mention it now. We better stop talking before somebody grows tired of our sad stories and commits suicide. That's a running gag, too. Whenever Ted goes on and on and on about his sad days with Elaine, the old woman kills herself. The guy commits Harry-Carry by burning himself. People want to kill themselves, Bev.
The guy pours gasoline all over himself and he's about to light the match, but then Ted gets pulled and is like, oh.
So please end this before people want to kill themselves and stop listening to us.
And